Taste of the Unexplainable by Don D. Corcel. Chapter 1. All my life, even as a kid, I heard the phrase, human beings only use 10% of their mind. Really? Only 10%? So what's holding us back? Why can't we make the jump to 15 or 20%? Or more? While more education always helps, the way we think is also an issue. We strive for normalcy, but then we start to think like everybody else. And how many of us are afraid of the dark, or of being alone? That something unexpected or uncontrollable might be lurking nearby. Yes, I believe there are mental pathways we're afraid to travel. In this series, we will explore the secret avenues of your mind. Secrets that hint at the existence of other intelligences, their abilities, and supernatural powers. But first, let me prepare you. What's it like to experience an unexplainable event? It's a bewildering state of mind that affects you physically. I believe as you experience things, your mind quietly recalls previous experiences of the same kind. It cushions the current experience with the cozy, confident feelings you've developed over the past. All this happens so blindingly fast, you don't even realize it. But when you experience something unexplainable, truly unexplainable, your mind goes blank. Because nothing in your life experience relates. You suddenly find yourself standing outside the game. Your body reacts with shock and puzzlement. You're dumbfounded. Your facial muscles lose control. Your jaw drops, and you feel a sense of being disconnected. The unexplainable is truly that jarring. And that's exactly how I experienced it the first time, about a month or two before my high school graduation. It was a cool spring evening, as I recall, and my first or second date with a young woman named Patty. When I got to Patty's house, she suggested we drive to her friend's house, where I met another high school couple, Liz and John. Officially, this was supposed to be a double date, but all we really did was chat and drink soda in the kitchen for a few hours. As the night grew long, we started looking for more exciting things to talk about, and eventually started telling ghost stories. Each of us spoke about hauntings and strange coincidences. Suddenly, Liz jumped up from her seat and suggested we hold a séance. She cut 26 paper squares and then wrote a letter of the alphabet on each. She then took the letters and placed them on the table in a circular pattern. Finally, she took a drinking glass from the counter, turned it upside down, and placed it in the center of the table. "It will spell out the answers," she said. As if we knew what we were doing, we each placed our index finger on the overturned glass and started snickering as Liz said, "Is there anybody out there who wishes to speak to us?" Nothing happened. We giggled. We looked so silly with our fingers on that upside-down glass. It was just sitting there. Perhaps even sillier were our facial expressions. Patty looked serious. John, meditative. Liz was expectant and pensive, and perhaps I just looked confused. Eventually, our concentration increased. That's when I noticed the glass starting to move. Almost imperceptibly at first. But within a minute's time, the glass was moving in a small, circular pattern. Nobody was talking now. Everybody was focused. I remember the scraping sound the glass made along the tabletop. Kind of a scratching sound. The circle got wider and wider, approaching the limits of the alphabet on the table. Our outstretched arms looked like a giant motor, cranking the glass around, toward, then away, over and over. I watched and listened for what seemed a long time, and then started to wonder if this was all that was going to happen. Abruptly, the glass stopped at the first letter, and then another two. Z. O. R. It was spelling the name Zorro, a popular kids' TV show at the time. Sure, I thought sarcastically. Let's get a message from Zorro. This was so dumb. My interest faded at that point, and that's when I started wondering who was pushing the glass to spell this stuff out. Someone picked up a notepad and started writing down the letters. When the next few letters arrived, I realized I didn't know what it was spelling anymore. After a few more letters, the glass stopped. Someone read the letters from the pad. Zoroaster. Huh? Zoroaster. What's that? I think it was someone who lived in ancient times, someone said. He had something to do with the Zoroastrian religion. That rang a bell. I remember hearing something about that in high school. That's when the first shadow of concern crossed my mind. Could my subconscious memories influence the motions of this glass? I didn't have time to consider it further. The girls were getting very excited now, and they started asking a lot of other questions. It wasn't even clear we were talking to the same person, or spirit, or whatever, because there were differences in the way the glass moved, responding to each question. Sometimes it was very precise, stopping carefully next to the letter, waiting for someone to announce it. At other times, the glass moved as if it were searching, the spelling more like phonetics, as though it were trying to sound out words it didn't know how to spell. But what intrigued me the most that evening was the mystery. There were a few occasions we had some idea what it was about to say and could anticipate the letters. But most of the time, we didn't have the slightest idea what was being said until the last few letters arrived. That and the fact that we were getting intelligent messages through this crazy thing truly amazed me. The following weekend, we tried it again. The glass seemed to be moving a little faster, and I had some mixed feelings as I watched. How should I feel about this? Should I be skeptical? Skeptical of what? My mind seemed to reply. Of what you're seeing right before your eyes? I wasn't paying attention again. We just got another reply, and I didn't even hear the question. It was like that. Taking time to be skeptical was like missing out on the fun. My curiosity was growing, and by the end of the second evening, I was more intrigued than ever. I simply had to try it again. On the third occasion, the glass was moving so fast the four of us had trouble keeping our fingers on it. Someone suggested only 2 people operate the glass, and that ended up being Patty and me. With only the 2 of us working the glass, it was way too dizzying to watch. That's when I realized it was indicating its choice of letters without stopping. It merely bobbed toward the letter, then resumed its circular path, all without losing speed. I marveled at this. It was like watching a race car driver skid around a track. The movements seemed haphazard, yet the spelling was completely accurate. Wow! That was the moment I had my first big realization. I realized I couldn't duplicate this speed and precision without considerable practice. But the problem was, I was already doing it. It was my finger and Patty's on the glass. My mouth dropped open. Doubts clouded my mind. How could this be happening? I felt disconnected, betrayed somehow. My friends were all laughing. I started looking under the table and around the room, looking for some other explanation or evidence of trickery. But of course there wasn't any. This was just a regular kitchen table and an ordinary drinking glass. But everybody else was kidding around, asking questions, what our futures would be like, who we would marry, if we would inherit fortunes, and so on. You know, the usual. But for me, the questions were now superfluous. I was fascinated by the movements of the glass itself. It was like watching a skilled artist up close. It was so precise. It wasn't a skill I had, but it was coming through me, or at least partially through me. Gosh, this was confusing. I think that was the night I started to appreciate the word unexplainable. These random-looking glass movements were delivering perfectly understandable and interesting messages. How could this be? We tried it a few more times over the next month or so, and I started feeling more comfortable, maybe even slightly confident with it all. I found myself going through 3 distinct mental states each time. At first, I wondered if it would work at all. I always started each session that way. It was so amazing. I was prepared for it to stop working and never resume. But it did work, and that's when I'd go into the second phase, staring at it in dumbfounded amazement. Usually this phase lasted only a short while because, as I had mentioned, it was too dizzying to watch. So that's when I'd enter the third phase, the phase where I surrendered my understanding and simply let it happen. I just let it go, wherever it wanted, and I'd trust that it would do the right thing. It was during these moments of surrender I became aware of my own humility and appreciation, an amazement or enthusiasm so extraordinary, so flavorful, it almost had a taste. My first taste of the unexplainable. That was the beginning then, the captivation, the utter amazement, and maybe a growing sense of confidence in the way you just let it work through you and with you. I felt a growing affinity for it. Indeed, I wanted more.